Okay, this is my week 4 reading response video form because it's easier for me. I wanted to start with the 2015 article, The Notes on Same-Sex Marriage. Um, it really made me think of a family comm class that I'm taking right now because the professor did like a disclaimer at the beginning that basically was like, most of the studies that we're going to look at and talk about are done on heterosexual couples, but people have done research on like the difference between heterosexual couples and queer couples, and what we found is that there is no difference and that people are people and they react in similar ways in relationship and in family structures. But what we've been talking about the whole class is so heteronormative, and it's so based in like what fathers do and what mothers do and what sons and daughters do in relation to their mothers and fathers, and how that behavior and that family will affect their like future heteronormative relationships and nuclear family children and things like that. And so it's just like frustrating because I feel like there could be a way to actually, basically, I just feel like he was saying at the beginning that what we're learning is going to be applicable to all types of families, but clearly it's not. And what we've also been learning is basically that like marriage is the pinnacle end of a relationship, and that's what like every other step of a relationship is striving towards. Um, and that's frustrating because there are so many people who don't want to be married and who don't want to be, or don't want to be partnered, or do want to be partnered but don't ever expect that to end in marriage, or want to, like, we don't talk about any structure besides straight people who get married and have children. And like, we acknowledge that other things exist, but not in like a scholarly way, and not in a way that actually teaches us how those relationships function. And not that many other people in the class seemed frustrated by these things, and that's crazy to me because like, I get really mad every day, and I have that class right after this class, and so I just have to go sit and, ugh, it's frustrating. Um, and then there's a quote on page 8. Um, Basically, I agree with this article. My stance is that like, marriage equality is great, but marriage is not the end all be all of relationships, and that we do need to center our conversations and our activism around the like more marginalized communities within the queer community, specifically queer people of color, and that marriage equality does little to nothing for, it's like one small part of the issue, and so many other things are not being addressed through that becoming the focus. Um, but then there's a quote on page, or not on even on page 8, it's on page 468, and it says, nevertheless, the gay marriage movement is not concerned with affirming those or other family forms so evident in queer history and contemporary life. In contrast, the movement endorses a view that same-sex relationships warrant social recognition because, and insofar as they mirror heterosexual relationships in the context of marriage, and even then, only as much as the mainstream straight society is willing to tolerate. And basically, what I wrote down is people want gay people to be gay as long as it's within heteronormative boundaries. And I learned about something in a queer ecologies class called homonormativity, which is essentially queer people who ascribe to heterosexual norms. So, like, the people fighting for marriage equality are probably the queer people who want to be married and want to fulfill those like heteronormative expectations. And that's not a bad thing. It's just not, it should not be seen as as everything. Um, and then there's another quote on um, page 470, that's talking about social work specifically. And it just says, consider how working towards systematic change has taken a backseat to individualized practice. This results in social workers less critically engaging with intersectional issues of oppression and considering social justice merely within a unidimensional lens. It is only with such a limited lens that prioritizing the fight for marriage equality can be considered social justice. And I think it's just interesting because we talked a lot in class about centering our conversation around the most marginalized group, and how that is kind of like the core of advocacy and of social work, and how fighting just for marriage equality does not do that, and just scratches the little surface of what we want this movement to be, this queer liberation movement. What else did I write? Oh, and I was just thinking about what other situations this has happened to, and when we less critically engage with intersectional issues of oppression, what other things have fallen through the cracks. Because what did happen with marriage equality is like similar to what happened with women's suffrage, and like everyone knows that 1920 is the year that women gained the right to vote, but that's just white women and things like that. And so like how many other ways that I don't know about, and that like these are the easy things to see, that that white women got the vote and other women didn't, or that marriage equality only it benefits a certain group of queer people, but I'm just wondering, like, what are other ways that this has happened that I can't see, or that I'm not aware of, because I'm not a part of the group that's affected, and so I just can't see it. And there's another quote about basically how it was talking about how in some states when marriage was legalized, they nullified other forms of like partnership, like legal partnership, and I just thought that was so weird, because does that mean that those people had to get married? I don't know. I just wanted to touch on that because that was confusing. This is already 7 minutes long, and I've only gotten to the first article. It's fine. I'm so sorry to whoever has to watch this. Okay, now I'm gonna switch to the next article, the defense of marriage. I thought it was interesting because both of these were written before same-sex marriage, was legalized nationwide. So I thought that was interesting, and I wonder what parts of this would change now if because of the legalization. Okay. So, what was interesting about this article, the other same-sex marriage article, was that I was more interested in less like why the article was pushing so much for same-sex marriage to be legalized, but more, it was so interesting why people didn't want it to be legalized. Like the reasons that people had against it were just like dumb. And I was wondering, they talked about how in here that like legalizing same-sex marriage would actually raise the federal budget, and I was just wondering if that actually happened. I don't really know how to check that, but I want to know. I didn't know that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was so expensive. That's crazy. Where does it say? I don't remember if I can find it, but yeah, that was insane. I did not understand that it was that expensive. I just think it's interesting that people work so hard to deny other people of things. And there's a page 7 quote that says, social work services with people who identify as LGBTQ can be most effective if delivered by a provider who understands the historical context of oppression while incorporating elements of advocacy and social intervention. And I just thought it was interesting because that's something somewhere where I feel the two articles agree, is just saying we need to understand the history and background of people before we can effectively engage with them. So I just think it's interesting, like they're saying different things, but they do agree on that point. It also talks on this page about how we as social workers can incorporate like denormalizing heteronormativity in our workplace, and I'm just like so for that, and making sure that there are like that the you walk into an office and there's like pamphlets you can grab. Just I thought it was interesting and made me excited to think about ways that I could like advocate or make seen alternate forms of relationship and family. And then there's page 9 quote that I just wrote yay next to. As the largest provider of services with oppressed populations and the social service profession with advocacy as a core element, social workers cannot allow oppressive practices and discrimination to go unaddressed. Scholarly literature that supports equality and inclusion is essential and can be used by social work policy advocates, practitioners, administrators to address these matters in a prepared manner. I just was excited about that, I guess. And then I'll make this quick so this video isn't 15 minutes long. But just talking about the Bleeding Albina article, I have friends who've been recently moving out of downtown and into different parts of Portland. So I have some friends in North Portland, some friends in Southeast, my parents live in Southeast, things like that. And so we've been having a lot of conversations about gentrification and how they are seeing it with their I mean, it's happening, so of course we're seeing it, but I didn't have I had never really seen it, or if I had, I didn't know that I was seeing it. And so now we're just having more conversations, and I have a lot of friends who have moved here from California, which is also attributing to gentrification, and just talking about like parts of Portland that used to be bad parts, but now there's like plans that have been in the works in the city for like years to change those parts, and like the gentrification of the Alberta district, and just things like that is so crazy to learn about and see firsthand, and to hear about from my friends who are living there. And I have a friend who, it was just like so interesting because she moved here from California, and we were talking to another friend one time about how the housing crisis in Portland, and how housing is so expensive, and how prices are going to go up and up and up and up and up until people can't afford them anymore, and then once people can't afford them, they're going to drop drastically, and then people are going to move or not make money or things like that, and it's going to be a crisis. And that crisis happened somewhere else too. I don't remember where because I'm bad at history and remembering things, but it happens everywhere. And my friend who moved here from California was just talking about how she was like, oh, well, I'm going to move way before then, so it doesn't matter. And it was just so crazy that she, like, didn't care. And I just wrote that, like, people are not invested in the history and the future of Portland. And so the people who are living here don't necessarily care about where we came from and where we're going. Cotton Eye Joe. And that's just sad to me. And I think that and I just wonder if that has played any part in it, or I'm sure that it has, but I wonder how much of a part, and how much people just like not caring to invest in what Portland could be and should be. Yeah, okay. Sorry, this is 13 minutes long. That's all I got.